everybody. I think we're ready to get started. I know a couple more people might be hopping on, but I'll go ahead and introduce what we're doing tonight. So I'm Katie Steck. I am here with Elisabeth Dawson from Copia Wealth Management Insurance Services, and we also have Copia Wealth Management Advisors, Inc. And we're here with Tom Welch, who is here from Neighborhood National to shed some light on all these crazy changes happening with the Paycheck Protection Program and some other updates that might be relevant. So I'll let Tom introduce himself and just tell us a little bit about where he is coming from.
Good evening, everybody. Glad that you could make our Zoom meeting tonight. And there's a lot of information, continuous change, and I will explain some of the stuff, some of the changes, and just know that there's going to be more changes coming because Congress is in the middle right now of, debating what changes should be made to these various programs.
Just so you all know where we're coming from is, we are, Katie and I are very comprehensive financial planners where we have quite a few business owners that have needed a lot of attention to detail and clarity on what has been offered through the Paycheck Protection Program, loans through the SBA, a lot of different worries and concerns that if they can continue to keep their business open, as well as even some tax mitigation strategies, because there's some companies out there that are doing amazingly well, but they still have a tax problem. Isn't that a wonderful problem to have? So what we did is we kind of coordinated this with Tom, our dear friend, and also someone that's kind of part of our team here to give out the best educated information about what's going on with this PPP. I mean, it's kind of a tongue twister, right? So the Paycheck Protection Program every day, and I know Tom's going to talk also about how many times the rules have already changed to this point. And I would imagine the majority of you that are on this call have already received a Paycheck Protection Program loan, but you're wondering how or when it could be forgiven and what the steps are, what are the easiest steps. And I think we have some of those steps that Tom has provided, but we want to give you at least a general knowledge. And I think some of the biggest questions too, because this pandemic is not over at all. And there is so many dollars that are still available, but if you've already gotten one of the big questions that we have is that, can you get a second one? We don't necessarily know the answer to that yet, but it's a big part of the conversation. So Katie and I are honored to be here with Tom. Tom is an incredible resource of knowledge, and he specializes in commercial loans and such with the SBA. So we couldn't be more proud and honored to be part of this as a fireside chat to all of you. And if you recall, if you go back and even Google it, basically back, in Teddy Roosevelt time, when it was in a time of crisis, Teddy Roosevelt will come out and have a fireside chat literally every week with basically the population of the United States to give some kind of sense of comfort, reform, and also clarity about where they stood. We're in those types of times now. That's why we designed the fireside chat the way we did. We want to be a resource of great knowledge, education, and clarity, and then also maybe another resource where you can bounce off questions or ideas or thoughts or whatever you might need, because all of us right now need to be able to talk. It's wonderful to see you all virtually, but it'll be a whole lot better when we get to see each other face to face and give hugs again. So without further ado, Tom, thank you so much for being here. Katie, thank you so much for basically being the moderator here today. And we have lots of questions from so many of you. And boy, Tom, we've got to pack this into about 45 minutes. So, hats off to you.
All right, well, here we go. Here we go. So just so you know, the U.S. Treasury and the SBA have issued 22 interim final rules. So those are all changes that change the program every single time. And I mean, that's the stuff that we have to keep up on, and it drives us crazy. And then there's also another set of questions that are put in place as well. There's like 49 of those that have been issued. The PPP program has been extended to August the 8th. So, you can still get a PPP loan. Not all lenders are doing them. And at this moment, we are not. It would be more like on a case-by-case basis. So there was an interim rule, the last change that was made, that was pretty substantial. So I just want to point out some really important points that you may or may not be aware of. So when the PPP loan came out, you had to spend 75% of the funds towards payroll. That last final interim rule changed that to 60%. And so now your non-payroll costs have dropped increased from 25% to 40%. So the problem is a lot of people were having problems with meeting the numbers, and there were going to be money that was not going to be forgiven. So Congress decided to change those numbers. In addition to that, this has caused a lot of confusion too, is that the covered period for when you have to spend the money has changed. So anybody that got a loan before June 5th, you were granted an 8-week covered period to spend all the money. Anybody that got one June 5th or after, they have 24 weeks. However, Congress did go back and they did say you can have 24 weeks. So anybody that got a loan before June 5th, you can select whether you're going to have 8 weeks or 24 weeks.
That's great. Okay, I wanted to just kind of have some clarity on that. So I know we had some questions from people that are actually on this Fireside chat, because they're saying, well, what's the difference between 8 weeks? What's the difference between 24? And, you know, I'm glad that you came up with that clarity, because after June 5th, if you already had your loan, we were thinking that we wouldn't be able to use 24 weeks, but now you're verifying that we can use 24 weeks.
Yeah, and you would normally want to use it if you hadn't expended all the money. So I have some clients that did stuff all of the money in that 8 weeks, but I have some clients that weren't able to. And so they'll be the ones who will want to choose the 24 weeks. So when I'm going to talk about, you know, how we're going to collect our applications. Our applications are not going to be by paper. You're going to actually go to our portal, our forgiveness portal, which is software that we have that will collect all this information, fill out your application, and you will upload all the documentation to back it up. When you enter our portal, you're going to select right off the bat whether you want 8 weeks or 24 weeks. The other change is that your loan was on deferral for 6 months, so there was no payment. Now they've extended that for 10 months after you are on the last day of your covered period. So if you take the 24 weeks and you add 10 months of deferral onto that. So it's just crazy, but they just want to give everybody enough time to get your applications processed. Everybody's been wanting to get it processed and get it behind them, but I've been trying to slow everybody down because the changes they're still not done, and I don't want people to make a mistake. So we're still, did you have a question?
Because about a month ago when we were talking about this, and everyone's still trying to find all the answers to all the questions and how to do this in the process, you were even saying back then, wait, because Congress is changing the law every day. And like you said, how many times have they already changed this?
22.
22 times. How many more times can they keep changing it? Probably quite a few.
Right.
I mean, they've been talking about it this week before they go into summer recess. So there's probably going to be even some more changes. So that's why we're glad to be able to be here today.
Yeah, and our other big sticking point is why we couldn't accept your application is that SBA has not opened their portal yet. So even if you submitted your application and we accepted it and we approved it, we had no place to send it to, or to even get it processed. So we just got clarification last week that their portal will be opening on August the 10th, is when they'll start accepting applications. However, there's a caveat with that, because if Congress does make changes, then they're going to have to modify their programs, and so that could be delayed. And our particular vendor who's going to do the processing for us, our portal won't be available till August the 14th. And they're saying, you don't have to rush, don't hurry, because we've got plenty of time to process these. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, because people are running out of PPP money and things are still not, back to the norm, is like, where can you look for other sources of capital? And the SBA does have the Economic Disaster Recovery Loan Program. And it was up to 2 million originally when it came out, but it's been capped now at 150,000. And it's just a loan that you go directly to the SBA, you go to their website, enter some information, and answer some questions. And the turnaround is getting much quicker now. It is a 30-year loan, and it has a rate of 3 3/4, and you have a 12-month deferral. So you don't make payments for the first 12 months after you receive it. Please, if you decide to do that, I have had some customers that their loans have been withdrawn because SBA sent them an email and said, you need to do further action. And if you don't follow through and do the further action, they don't hear from you in 30 days, they'll withdraw the loan request. So you'll have an approved loan and you'll lose it. Yeah.
Right.
So
We were talking about this a little earlier too, that some loans, they'll go through the process and might be declined. So even though it's kind of painstaking, get back on the phone and wait your half hour, 45 minutes to talk to someone to see if they can actually, take the decline off and process your loan. There's got to be some kind of reason why they didn't do it. But do you know of any specific industries or types of companies that maybe those things would be, declined from?
Well, I mean, it's more, I know one thing that they look at originally is your credit score. So if your credit score is below a certain level, the underwriters are just taught to decline it right off the bat.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have to be able, the other tricky thing is you have to show that you can cash flow the loan. And if you've had a 50% reduction in revenues, you're probably not going to be able to prove that you can cash flow it. But I do have some clients that were affected negatively like that. They have reapplied, and I think they're getting through the process. I think the underwriters are understanding the problems more now and being a little bit more reasonable about it. So I would recommend that if you need capital, go ahead and apply for it. You have like 2 months, I think, to sign the loan docs. So,
Wow.
Just go grab the money and, be safe. So the other thing that Congress did, I would imagine a lot of you on the line have had SBA loans or have SBA loans now. If you have an existing SBA loan, the government, whether it's an SBA 7A or a 504, the government's making your payment for you for 6 months. The interesting thing is that if you get a new loan right now and you get it approved by the SBA before September the 27th, that you're going to get 6 months of free payments as well. So the money we were talking about, that $130 billion, there is a bill before Congress to continue to make those payments for another 6 months. So I don't know if that will get approved or not, but that is in the mix of things that are to come.
Tom, when do you think they're going to come out with some news about that?
Well, they're saying that it's, between the House and the Senate, it could be 2 to 3 more weeks before they come to a resolution, and they throw a lot of things, as we all know, into one bill. And so
Right.
Instead of getting things approved one by one, we're waiting for one gigantic bill to get approved.
Right.
But let me tell you the really good news,
Okay, good.
which
Yeah,
probably will probably affect most of the people on the phone call, but not everybody. There is a bill before Congress in this whole package that if your loan was $150,000, your PPP loan or less, that you may be able to just sign a 1-page certification that you met all the requirements of the PPP program, and the SBA is going to say, we're done, and you do not have to submit anything or complete anything further. So that would be a huge benefit to most of you and probably take a lot off your mind. So let's stay tuned for that one. The next thing I wanted to talk about is there are currently, the SBA has come out with 2 applications. So there was the long application that is like about 11 pages long, and it's mostly because it has a lot of instructions on it. And then they just came out with an easy application. So there are 3, when you fill out the long form, there's going to be some additional calculations that you have to go through for the forgiveness. And so you'll also be completing a Schedule A and a Schedule A worksheet. Those actually are to collect information about your employees. So you'll be entering in each employee, how many hours they worked, what their payroll was, because it's going to calculate the FTE for each employee, as well as whether there was a reduction in their salaries or not. The easy form is a little bit not as complicated. It's going to you're not going to have to do as much calculation, and like our system's going to calculate for you anyways, but it's going to require less. But there's only 3 scenarios under which you would qualify for the easy form. So 1, you either must be self-employed, an independent contractor, or a sole proprietor with no employees. That would allow you to use the easy form. 2, if you did not reduce the annual salary or hourly wages of any employee by more than 25% during the covered period, and you did not reduce the number of employees or average paid hours of employees between January 1st of this year and the covered period, you would be able to qualify for the easy form. And then the last one is similar in that you cannot have reduced their salaries by more than 25%, and you were affected by having to close down due to government requirements. So you will have to provide the documentation to show that you were forced to close down, and then you will be able to use the easy form for that. Do you want to stop for a minute?
Because I would say a lot of your business owners that are on this call, could they say that they're self-employed? I could say I'm self-employed.
Well, but you have employees,
yeah, so
right?
You don't necessarily fall into that category, right?
No. Yeah. So at least you won't, in the first point, you wouldn't fit in that, but the other 2, you might, if you kept all your employees on, and you didn't reduce their salaries and use the PPP money to make their, meet their salary, then you would qualify for the easy form.
So this brings me to a question. I know Katie has some questions from people that are on this call too. One of my questions here would be is that there's a formula, because everyone on the planet has been affected by this pandemic, and we've all been affected, and majority of us have been affected by the financial crisis. So if there was, you mentioned 25% reduction on salary. Well, what if someone had to be furloughed, or multiple people had to be furloughed, and maybe they were just part-time? How does that work? We talked about this equation once before.
I think if they're part-time, then you have to take them and add them together to get one FTE.
Okay.
So like if they both work 20 hours, then together they have 40, so they're going to count as one FTE. Yeah. That's like I said, it's going to get kind of tricky when you get down into the nuts and bolts of it. I'm surprised of how complicated it is.
Yeah, you do that. It might be a loan up to $300,000 that they might be able to do the easy form too, right?
Yeah, there's another proposal to go up to as much as $350,000. Wow. and use the easy form, but we don't know where Congress is going to finally settle. Right. We're very hopeful for the $150,000, but it would be even greater if it was the $350,000, because that will take a lot of work off of the bank's plates, as well as the SBA, because the bank, we're going to have to verify that all the information that you sent is complete and correct, because we can't send an incomplete application.
I think you may have addressed this a little bit, but I want to make sure this individual gets their question answered correctly. If you choose the 24-week option, does that mean the number of employees that you have to meet for forgiveness is determined at the end of the 24 weeks?
You have up until the end of the year, to December 31st, to restore the employees back to the number that you had before. So that's one of the safe harbor things that the SBA is going to allow, is that as long as you restore them before the end of the year, that you will be able to still get your forgiveness. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, I think so. Thank
And
you.
I think I read something about this, Tom, that they would have to go over that same 24-week period versus 24-week period last year, correct? There's like a comparison to that?
There's a comparison, but it's not this. It's not the 24-week period. I think it was confusing, and I had to look that up for one of our clients yesterday. I think he sent a question into you guys as well.
Yeah.
There's, and I did not print it out and bring it with me, but there's specific period at the beginning that you pick to match up, and it has to match for 2019. So like if you pick January 1st, 2019 through January 31st, 2019, then you have to compare it with the same period of January 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2020. That's a period that you select. So
And there's also that one equation, and I don't want to interrupt Katie from asking, but there's that one equation that if you've had a 50% drop in productivity from your business this year over last year, that's another component with this as well.
I haven't seen that as far as not for like safe harbor or for that 50% drop would be like if we were going to talk about maybe possibly second PPP loan. Okay. So, if Congress does decide to do the second PPP loan, the parameters may change and be more restrictive, and it might be maybe only up to 300 employees that you would be eligible still for another PPP loan, but your business would have had to drop by 50%. Okay. So I think you might be thinking about that because there's nothing as far as a safe harbor for payroll for that. A 50% drop would be nice, but yeah, it's not there.
It had something to do with the forgiveness that I was reading about, but I'm not going to intercede on that. I'll let Katie ask the next question.
Okay.
Well, I think also you referenced this, but we did have a question of, may I apply for additional PPP funding? And I think you said not yet, but it's maybe coming.
It's a possibility because we have that $130 billion that's sitting there, that Congress will repurpose that money. So there could be a second round of PPP loans, but it will be a tighter, smaller group of people that will be eligible for them, more geared to even smaller businesses.
Understood.
Okay.
We just got a question in on the page 3 Easy Loan app forgiveness form. When they ask for payroll cost, does this include how much you pay the employees per month only, or does this include the payroll taxes that the company has to pay?
It includes the payroll taxes too. So when we were calculating your application for your loan amount, as long as you provided that information to us or your payroll service provided it to us, then we would have included it. So you might want to check with us to see if you did our loan. If you did a loan with us, then you might want to call me or Tammy to see if we included it or not in the calculation, because you also get to include health insurance benefits and retirement account, the contributions that were made by the employer, not the employee. And it's the same thing on the tax part. Do you have another question?
If the employer did let's say a 401k match, a profit sharing match, a defined benefit contribution on behalf of the employees. And I want to kind of go back to something, Tom, because you said prior to June 5th, if you had gotten your loan, you were supposed to go on the 8-week period of time to do your information, but then they changed the law to 24 weeks. But you also made mention too, because I know you recommended to me, and I'm part of the clientele here too, that money to have it separated in a different bank account for your business and use those money so you have a good accounting, because now once the forgiveness process goes through and it's done, you have to hold on to this documentation for 6 years, which is huge. I think it's more than when you have to hold on to tax returns for 5. And just depends, right? But you had mentioned something earlier today about if you already used all that money, because everyone prior to June 5th was saying, oh my gosh, I only have 8 weeks to spend this money, I better get it spent. So what if their expenses have actually increased now, but we can choose any period of time for those expenses to offset?
You mean, well, I mean, so your loan amount stayed the same, it didn't change, but you can have a longer period of time to offset the expenses. Like I said, most of the clients I'm finding, you know, they didn't use all their money, so they need the longer period. But
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
I just think it's kind of categorically, I would imagine a lot of people on this call probably got their loan prior to June 5th, and they probably were in this kind of sense of urgency and anxiety to get that money spent within 8 weeks. And I've talked to business owners too that said, gosh, I don't care if I have to pay this loan back because I need this money for a longer period of time.
I just had one question really quick that just to clarify what you just said. Did you say 2019 comparison period is the same as
Yes.
24-week period you are claiming for 2020?
Yeah, well, you're not going to be, don't get the, it's not the 24-week period. It was like, mostly from what I can tell, it was 90-day periods of time that you could pick. So most of it was January 1st through March 31st of 2019 to January 31st to March 31st of 2020. The only thing that was different is if you are a seasonal business, then you would have been able to pick a different time of when your season starts. So like we had, you know, like church camps. Well, they're not busy in the first quarter of the year. They're busy during summertime, right?
Sure.
So they would have picked a different time period to be able to, you know, calculate their highest revenues, because they don't have that many employees working at the beginning of the year. All their employees are during the summertime. So they wanted to make sure that they captured the most money to cover the summer when it was coming right up behind us, you know. So we also, I want to make sure that you understand the 24 weeks and the 8 weeks, because it's specific days. So the 24 weeks is 169 days. So you have to, SBA is very specific, and you have to count from the day that you received your money in your bank account. That's your days start there. And then you have to, you know, it's 169 days from there. Or if you did the 8 weeks, it's 56 days from there. So, because some people are kind of being, you know, a little lax about it, but SBA will be very specific about it. An ARC system is actually going to count the days for you. So it will tell you what it is. One of the other changes that came out too was something that's called an alternative payroll covered period, because some people's payrolls were going to fall like by a couple of days outside of their 56 days or their 169 days. So when you go into our application, if you have payroll that is biweekly or paid more frequently, then you should be picking the alternative payroll covered period. So SBA will allow you to capture your payroll that kind of falls out of at the last, you know, out in the last week of your forgiveness. So you are able to do that. Kind of a not so nice thing that they included that I don't really like, but they capped the owner's compensation. So if you're going to go with the 8 weeks, the owner's compensation is capped at $15,385. And if you're doing 24 weeks, it's capped at $20,833. So, you know, that kind of could create a problem, I think, for some people. You know, so we're going to have to, you know, walk you through that cap. And people have also been asking Katie about forgiveness, like, oh, what if I choose 24 weeks? Do I have to wait till the end of the 24 weeks to submit? Well, no. If you use all the money up in week 9 or week 16, once the money's completely funded, you can request forgiveness. So.
Great. I think what kind of goes along with that is a couple other questions we have are where do we submit the receipts for expenses paid for the PPP loan?
So most banks are going to be using third-party vendors to do this, or they'll have their own software. So like I said, do not fill out the paper application. And we actually, on our software, you're actually going to be uploading all the documentation to us. So hopefully you scanned it and you saved it, and it was, you have it all organized, because like if you want to submit your payroll, you're going to have to, and let's say that it's bi-weekly, you're going to have to submit your payroll for, May 15th, and you'll upload the payroll report. Then if you have payroll on May 31st, you have to upload the payroll report for May 31st. And to just go one step further, just make sure that in the application instructions, it's going to specifically tell you what kind of documentation you have to provide to us. So with SBA, they're, like I said, they're very detail oriented. So if you can't only just give us your payroll report, you have to give us your bank statement to show that that money was ACH'd out of your account and it was really paid. And same thing for, like, if you have a landlord and you paid rent, you either have to provide, if he doesn't give you a receipt or a bill, you have to provide us with a copy of your lease, and we have to provide that to them. And then you have to provide us with copies of the checks that you wrote to them and the bank statement to show the check cleared. So
Wow.
It's going to be work.
Very good to know.
Yeah. And hopefully that's primarily for, obviously it's for the big application, and even the easy application, you are going to have to submit documentation for it. If you're in that, sweet spot of 150, you get to sign hopefully you'll just get to sign the one page, and you won't have to do all of that. But just remember, it's going to be tedious, and don't get frustrated with us when we look at your application. We're like, hey, it's not complete. We need, your 401k, contribution that you made, and we need your health insurance contribution and the backup to show that you spent that money, because we're going to have to prove up every dollar. And all we are is really the loan processor for the SBA. We're not the real approver of it, even though, just so you know, when you send your application to us and you think it's completed, we are going to go through it, and we have our own checklist of everything that we're going to have to make sure that's there. And then if we think it's incomplete, or you might not be going to get 100% forgiveness, we're going to come back to you and I'm going to say, Elisabeth, I'm coming up with, you're only going to get 85%, forgiveness. Do you have any other documentation that we can put in here to get 100%? So we're not going to just submit it to the SBA without checking with you first.
There's a question, I think it kind of ties in with this too. It's from Madison Marchetti. It's about, will we be taxed for the loan amount we received at the end of the year? Because if it's forgiven, are we going to get 1099? Have you heard anything about that?
The only thing that I've seen so far that's going to be, you're going to have to recognize as income, is those debt relief payments that we discussed earlier, where SBA is making the payment for you. They're going to make you claim that as income.
Okay.
But we have not heard, and I haven't seen anything in the documentation yet that says anything about the PPP loan having to be claimed as income.
It brings me to another question, and I'm not sure if anybody else has this question out there, but the payroll tax, because normally for our employees, we get to write off the payroll tax. But if it's coming from the Paycheck Protection Program that we are using that money to pay payroll and it's paying the payroll tax, are we going to be able to write off the payroll tax that we would have normally been able to write off since this loan is forgiven?
I think that's going to be a question for your CPA. That's probably above my pay grade.
Yeah, one thing I've heard is that we won't be able to take that deduction. So definitely everybody on this call, make sure you have a great conversation with your tax professional. And if you don't get the right answer you're looking for, let us know. We'll be able to introduce you to maybe some tax professionals that can give you those answers too. So again, I'm not a tax professional. Tom's not a tax professional, nor is Katie. But we're trying to follow the law and do this the right way and not have this huge burden, because again, remember, and I've said this on our previous calls, it's really hard for a business owner to say, I have to get a loan to help pay for 75% of payroll. It's important to keep our employees, and it's important to keep our businesses afloat. But there comes a day that you're kind of going, oh my gosh, I'm getting a loan to make something go out, and now I don't have that security to pay it back. Thank God we have the option or the opportunity to get this paid off, or forgiven in full. So I'm happy to hear you say that, Tom, that you will actually work with people to say, can you bring in some more expenses? the answer for every business owner, I'm sure on this call, is yes.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, if we submit the application to SBA, it goes into review with them for them, and they have 90 days to review it. So if like I said earlier, if they find something that's incomplete or not completed correctly, they're going to kick it back out, and then their clock starts all over the 90 days. So you're going to get deferred even longer. So that's why I said, let's not rush getting the application. Let's get it right the first time and make sure that you include all the documentation required, because it's just going to muck up the system if we have to keep coming back to you and going, okay, now they need this, now they need this, now they need this, and we're used to dealing with them in these situations on regular SBA loans. So, but going back to your question too, I did see something about payroll taxes, the timing of when they're going to be due was going to be deferred. And I don't know if that got approved or not, but I had seen that in the legislation.
But if we're paying payroll like we would normally pay payroll, those payroll taxes are already coming out.
They're due, yeah.
I don't know how that's really going to translate or how we're going to help. It's kind of interesting with the CARES Act as well. There's people out there that have pensions or 401ks or even, the matches that they need to make for their employers. If you haven't talked to your plan administrator or your financial professional about this, or your administrator, this is something where if you have to make contributions, literally still for last year, 2019, we have until the beginning of January 2021. However, tax extensions, if you filed a tax extension for your business, and it's basically goes to September 15th or eventually October 15th. If you don't make those contributions for your business, for your employees on their behalf by the 15th of September, you have to file your taxes, right? But if you make the 2019 contribution after the 15th of September, it's going to fall into 2020. So make sure you're really working with your tax professional to be strategic with that. Now more than ever, we have to pay attention to every responsibility we've got.
The only other thing that is, a little confusing to me, and I'm going to have to request further clarification from the SBA, because it is a question that's been coming up several times with a couple of clients that I have, is the safe harbor thing. Because on the easy application, it basically says that you have to have not reduced your salaries by 25%, or the wages, and that what was the other little tidbit in there? And you had to restore the employees back by a certain date. But then the safe harbor, there's a standalone safe harbor that says as long as you bring them back before the 31st of December, you're going to be okay. Or if your business was affected, that you had to close down because of government regulation, that you're still going to get your forgiveness. So on the application, it kind of like says that you have to have both, that you couldn't have reduced your salaries and you had to show that you were affected and shut down. But then there's a standalone thing in the law where I just thought, just say, no, if you were affected, then you're not going to lose your forgiveness. So let me send a question up to SBA to find further clarification on that, because I've been telling people different things, and I'm still not certain after reading everything that I read today. I'm like, this just doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I think that we have so many people on this call today too, because a lot of this doesn't make sense, and we want some clarity. Everybody wants clarity on how to do this right. I think that now would be the time. I want to ask everyone that's an attendee today, if you can give us some feedback, give it to Katie or whomever, just let us know, do you want us to have another one of these in another month when we will definitely have more clarity than we have today, but maybe even a step-by-step process of where you can go, how you can get your PPP loan forgiven, and work with a professional to be able to help you out with that, or even just talk about your unique situation. Each and every one of us have a unique situation. So I would love for you to say that in the chat and say, gosh, I want this, or we won't do another one if we don't have interest. But it seems like we've had incredible interest for this particular subject. That's why we did 2. 1 month ago, one today. And I think there's still going to be more questions to ask, especially if, let's say, Congress comes back and says, well, you know, we're still in this pandemic, we're still in this shutdown, and there's even more money now for a second run of the Paycheck Protection Program that people can have forgiven. That's a big possibility that can occur in our immediate near future. And I think there's going to be a lot to be said in the next 3 weeks. So yes, if you can feedback with Katie in the chat and just say that this was beneficial for you, or what else you would maybe like to hear, we will be happy to set this up again in about a month's time.
Yes, at the end too, please stick around. We have a few more minutes of this, but there'll be a survey that will pop up on your screen, and we'd love for your feedback and for you to let us know how we can follow up. So please know that that will be coming as well. I have just a couple more questions. Tom, so worst case scenario, if let's say that 90% of your expenses were forgiven, but there was 10% or so that isn't, would you be able to have a portion of your loan forgiven and have to pay back the rest? Is that an option of a part?
Yes.
Partial?
Yeah, because we have, we're going to have 4 options for your loan. So we either approve 100%, we approve a partial amount, we decline you completely, which I'm not expecting that we would have that, or we'll decline you with prejudice. And I'll do the last one later in a minute. Let's go back to your first question. So let's say that there's 10% left over. So basically what's going to happen is you know, if you were applying now and you were on the 6-month deferral and you got your loan before June the 5th, you had a 2-year loan. So you had a deferral for 6 months, and then you would have 18 months to pay it back at 1%. So whatever the balance is, you know, we'll tell you what your new payment's going to be, because we will be required to notify you that you weren't forgiven 100%. This is the balance that's due, and you'll have to start making payments of X, you know, over the next 18 months.
Well, that doesn't sound so bad. You know, let's say it's 100 or I don't know, 200,000 and 20% didn't get forgiven, and you have a 1% loan to pay back in how many months, Tom?
18.
18. Because I can imagine even myself going through this whole process, I'm sure I screwed something up.
Well,
but I mean, but we were trying to survive, right? We were all, and trying to take care of the people that are, you know, help us run our businesses to make sure we're taking care of them. But it's just that small fraction of the unknown. But what I did like is earlier, Tom, you said that if it gets to that point, we're going to look back and say, hey, do you have some more expenses that we could use during that period of time? Which I think is a huge peace of mind, because, you know, at the end of the day, we just don't want the stresses of these things. But I think the stresses are a little less concerning if we have a period of time and 1%, which should be more nominal or something to be able to deal with.
Yeah, so 2 other things that I'll mention is we're not doing it at this moment, but most people got, you know, you got this 24-month loan, right, with a 6-month deferral. Well, when the new regulations came in, the last big change by Congress, and you got your loan after June the 5th, well, your loan term went to 5 years. Okay. So you can ask us for a 5-year term, but if you got it before, but the bank and you have to agree to the 5-year term. And we're really, we don't want a 5-year loan on our books at 1% because we'll lose money, you know. So, but, you know, if it gets to, you know, we'll have to have a conversation about it as to whether we're going to be able to do it or not. And then we just talk about the last thing that I mentioned about the decline with prejudice. It sounds really bad, but what it means is that SBA randomly picked your application and it's going through a finer tooth review. And so we get pulled out of the picture 100% completely. And the SBA is just going to be dealing, they can ask us to get information, or they can deal directly with you. So most likely you probably won't see a lot of that. And I think it's going to be on the larger amounts that they really, you know, hone in on. But that's why you have to keep the paperwork for 6 years too, because they have up to 6 years to come back and check to make sure that you know, use the money appropriately and that the program is intact, because overseeing the SBA is the Office of the Inspector General. And so if the Office of the Inspector General starts finding fraud in this program, they're going to start clamping down on the SBA, and the SBA is going to have to start doing more and more reviews. So that, I didn't really want to talk about that, but I thought, you know what, we'll throw it out there because it could be, something that happened to somebody. So, just weird that it happened. But I'm not anticipating that the majority of our clients will be under review.
Well, I think the big fact there is have your documentation, work with someone if you need to, make sure that you're doing everything on the up and up, because there are some bad actors that we're already starting to see in the news that have totally taken advantage of this program that has helped good business owners, but have totally taken advantage of it and abused it. And quite honestly, I think if you're in that ballpark of 150 to 300,000, the SBA is not necessarily looking for you. You better be prepared, because Tom and I've talked about this. You better be prepared and have all your documentation, but they're looking for the ones that have been extremely abusive and didn't use it for the right reasons.
So what percentage do you think of the entire 5 million loans that were made, what percentage do you think are 150 or less of the whole portfolio?
I think it's probably a fairly high percentage, Tom.
Yeah, it's 87%.
Wow.
80%. I think that's remarkable, because that's really, 5 million businesses, 150,000 or less, or right in that ballpark. 86, 87, 88%. That's tremendous. That's who it needs to help. That makes me proud, to hear that, because the bigger concern was that, so many of these bigger companies were just scooping up all the money. And I remember in the beginning of this process, a small business is not 500 employees. A small business is maybe 50 and under. It makes me proud to hear that, in the upper 80 percentile, that it was used for people that really needed it. That's amazing.
Yeah, our average loan size was about 103,000. So we had a couple that were 2 million, 3 million, but our average was, was that. So it was nice.
Yeah,
Katie, do you have a couple more questions, it looks like?
Yeah, there's a couple more. I think I can summarize some of them. So I know last time we did this about a month ago, you mentioned that the portal for your bank wasn't up and running yet. So you were suggesting people wait. Is that up and running? Can people start that process if they'd like?
No, so I kind of mentioned it earlier that the portal for SBA is not even open yet, and won't be open until August the 10th. So we didn't want to open our portal up and start the time clock ticking, and we don't have anywhere to send their application. Our portal will be open August 14th. So that's when you can start submitting.
That you can share with us, so that maybe everybody that's on this call, we can forward that to them in the future. Will you have a link for the portal?
So each person will individually get their own link to their own portal, and you will actually create a PIN number. So there's only one PIN number per company. So like if you and Katie and one other of your employees needed access to it, you all have to share the PIN.
Got it.
We sent out an email tonight that we're going to send out the link on the 14th, but I think we'll probably send it out a little bit earlier than the 14th, provided Congress doesn't change anything. Remember, that's the caveat. Is
probably going to happen. So we just need to
it's probably going to happen. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to thank these people that have definitely listened to us. There was a Wayne and a Madison Marchetti and Diana Ruby, several people saying, gosh, yes, another one will be helpful to get more information. And this has been very helpful for people. So I'm happy to hear that, because, we put these things together and we want to make sure that people are getting a good amount of information back, but know that there's resources to come to. Katie, do you have any more questions?
I think we covered all of the questions that were submitted. So,
okay.
Do you have any other updates for us, Tom?
No, I think we really kind of covered it at a very high level. I mean, there's a lot of detail, that yet to get down into the weeds, but that's really when you need to get with your HR people and your accounting professionals and your tax people to help get you through some of these issues and trying to interpret the law and what it says.
Right,
And
it's a patience process for sure. So make sure y'all get your patience on.
and you guys, I have been working with Elisabeth personally for a little bit over a year and a half, and her and Katie have been like an excellent resource to me and helping us get our life in order and our house in order. And I'm very thankful to them and to the knowledge that they have and that they bring to the table. It's a whole nother side, of things that I needed help with, and you don't know who to turn to, and they're great resources, and they're very open and willing to help you in any way. So thank you both. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Tom. And thank you, Don, in the background.
I'm trying to be great.
Thank you.
I feel like those guys behind the weatherman.
Yes, you're like
behind.
behind.
Busted.
And we love you holding these and helping our business owners kind of navigate this situation. And this is really what we do well too, is help with, we had a lot of tax questions, and we're not tax professionals, but helping business owners do that tax planning and really think long term for their businesses. And I don't know if Elizabeth, you want to expand on that any before we kind of wrap up here.
I'd be happy to. And one thing I want to also mention too is that Tom put a detailed list together for today, and I'd love for you all, just let us know if you want a copy of that. We'll send it to you. We want to make sure you have information, and maybe the latest, greatest information. And again, we do work with tax professionals. Thank you so much, Tom, for just your wonderful statement of who we are and what we do. And we are all coming together as a team to be a great resource for many, many more. I see so many of you saying even now, great, need more information, really great, keep them coming. So we'll keep them coming. And from a business owner standpoint, some of the things that we do with our business owners is really to look at this is cash flow, right? This is income. This is money coming to you. We don't know the tax ramifications of this being forgiven, but sometimes when things are forgiven, there might be a tax notice. We'll be waiting to hear if that's going to happen or not. But if we have to mitigate taxes along the way, there are certain, procedures, certain strategies that we do work with tax professionals that we'd love to extend to our business owner family here on this call. So if you want information about that, or a 15-minute call with myself, with Katie, with Tom, or all three of us combined about your unique situation, your unique, opportunity, please let us know. We love hearing that you enjoyed this because it makes it all worth it. We are all in this together. It's been a world of crazy. I think most people think, gosh, I can't wait until 2020 is over so I can get back to a more sense of real life. But enjoy this time. Enjoy this time with your families. Try not to be so stressed out. We can't help ourselves because we just don't understand the future. But know this, and this is from a wonderful person that I have as a business coach, and she said, I just got the facts. I went back 100 years ago, and when there was a major pandemic in 1917, and basically people went back into a rhythm and a routine after that was done, but they had to shut down just like what we've dealt with. So if it was way worse back then, I'm pretty sure and confident that we're going to be able to recover and come back to a different place, but we'll have a completely different respect for money, for profit, for running our businesses, for tax, everything, and having great professionals in your life. Because as I say, there's always a professional for everything. You just need your team put together in one place. So it's been an honor to have you all, and thank you so much. We're here.
Thank you.
And if you just hold on for a moment as we end this, there will be a survey that will pop up. We'd love to get your feedback so we know how to reach out and what you're looking for in the future. Please take a moment to make an appointment so we can talk about your personal situation as well. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
The information provided in this show is for informational and educational purposes only. This show is not investment advice, nor is it intended to address the financial needs of any particular viewer. The opinions expressed on this show are not intended to be an endorsement of any particular investment strategy or service of any other kind. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned throughout the show. Before acting on information in this show, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular situation and strongly consider seeking advice from a financial advisor.